Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tom Fitton, Judicial Watch President, here with our weekly update on Facebook Live. Thank you for joining us this week. As always in this town, it's a busy week for those of us fighting and uncovering government corruption. And those of you who don't know what Judicial Watch is, we're a nonprofit, nonpartisan educational foundation that uses the rule of law or pursues the rule of law and protects the rule of law to uncover government corruption. We sue under the Freedom of Information Act. We directly sue over government corruption as well. So we don't just come on and talk about stuff and give you opinion. We're in court battling, we're investigating, and we're doing the work that Congress isn't doing, the media isn't doing, and frankly the Justice Department often isn't doing as well. So we're your watchdog in Washington. So we have a lot to report to you about today. First up, obviously, the big news is the reported criminal investigation of President Trump. I don't know if it's true or not, whether there is an actual criminal investigation going on, but it highlights the absurd nature of what is happening here in Washington, D.C., where the president is being targeted for an obstruction investigation, not really based on anything substantive, as best I can tell, but based on an employment dispute. He fired the FBI director. The FBI director's friends at the FBI didn't like it. They began an investigation of the president, and a retaliatory investigation of the president. And now supposedly Special Counsel Mueller has taken it up and has broadened it and is asking anyone they can think to ask about this supposed obstruction. Firing the FBI director for a variety of reasons, all of which were valid, or none of which were necessary in order for him to fire, because the president can fire the FBI director for no reason, just because he doesn't like the color of his tie or something. So the president isn't above the law, but he's not beneath the law. And this has been the goal of the deep state, the Obama administration, their holdovers, and their former officials. And it's the goal of the partisans who don't like him, and probably there are some Republicans who would happy to see him go as well. They want to remove this president from office, jail him if necessary. If not, they'll jail his family, or they'll jail people close to him. This is a really lawless attempt to go after a duly elected president. And if the president had done something wrong, Judicial Watch would be first up there, saying there needs to be a criminal investigation, there needs to be an independent investigation, what have you. And it also highlights the fact, the Mueller investigation and the leaks from Mueller's investigation, that Mueller's office and the office of the special counsel might be unconstitutional, and looks to me to be unconstitutional, and this is why. Mueller was appointed under these regulations the Justice Department promulgated during General Reno's term. Remember, Janet Reno? And the special counsel is appointed by the Attorney General, or in this case, the Deputy Attorney General. And he's appointed, given a charge to investigate X, Y, or Z, and then the responsible official washes his hands. Well, under our constitutional system, that's not the way it's supposed to work. Under the regulations, Mueller has all the powers of a U.S. attorney, but none of the accountability. The U.S. attorney is appointed by the president, confirmed by the Senate before he can take up his job. And if there are prosecutors in the Justice Department who aren't subject to confirmation, they answer to people who are, or answer to people who answer to people who are. So there's this lawful delegation of authority. In this case, that doesn't happen. He is not supervised day to day by the appropriate officials in the Justice Department. Therefore, he doesn't really have the authority under our Constitution to do the work he's supposedly wanting to do, which is to investigate, and let's assuming he's doing the right thing and just trying to do his job. It's not about Mueller at this point, it's about the Office of Special Counsel. And if I were them, I'd go back to square one, however politically uncomfortable it is, to make sure that that office is lawful and lawfully run. So that's a big deal. The other issue is the suspicious circumstances under which Mueller was appointed. Comey testified incredibly that he took these records, these memos, and who knows what else, and I'll get to that in a minute, in order to have a special counsel, and he leaked them in order to have a special counsel appointed. Again, payback. Well, did the Deputy Attorney General know about that when he appointed Mueller? Did Mueller know that was the game that Comey was playing when he took up the position? And he and Comey have a professional relationship, a friendly relationship. It's been reported there's a mentor-protege relationship there. I tell you what, if I were Mueller, I'd say I'm out. I'm washing my hands of this. You need to have someone who's not seemingly conflicted here. So that's a big deal. Of course, we had Sessions' testimony this week, and again, he highlighted the fact that Comey deserved to be fired. That's the takeaway from Sessions' testimony. There's a lot of other noise about meetings he may or may not have had with the Russian ambassador, which which didn't pan out in favor of the leftist conspiracy theory there. But Sessions did a good job in testifying. But I would suggest that Mr. Sessions needs to unrecuse himself if necessary. I don't even know if the recusal initially was necessary in the Russian issue, to kind of, again, fix this Justice Department issue with the special counsel. And I've been calling on for a special counsel to be appointed on the case of Hillary Clinton. But what I didn't look at were the regulations guiding his authorities. And I recognized immediately upon reviewing them when Mueller was appointed that there were constitutional problems there. So again, we're not just talking, we're in court. So this is the two things in court that you'd be interested in. One is a letter that may end up in court, and the other is a lawsuit. So we warrant. Now the problem with Comey is he took federal records that he wasn't allowed to take. He wrote these memos, presumably on FBI computers. Even if he didn't, they were about government business. He was FBI director. Did he have permission to take these records, to leave copies behind? I don't know. I don't think that was the case based on what we hear or what we've been able to read and based on what Comey's testimony is. So what we did was we sent a letter to the acting FBI director, McCabe, reminding him of his obligations under the Federal Records Act to take action if he becomes aware, the agency becomes aware of records that have been taken improperly or removed improperly from the agency, and get them back, because they're not, the records don't belong to Comey, they belong to us, the American people. And of course we have FOIA lawsuits and FOIA requests that are impacted by the fact that these records may have gone missing as a result of Comey's machinations. So we told Mr. McCabe that you need to take action. You need to notify the archivist, and the law also requires you to notify the Justice Department to take action, initiate action with the Justice Department to get these records back. And if they don't, we promised a lawsuit. So we are trying to get these records for you, the American people. And then separately today, just a little over an hour ago, we sued in federal court for one of the key Comey memos. This is the memo that Comey supposedly wrote after that conversation he supposedly had with the president, where it was supposedly said that the president wanted him to back off or to find it in his heart to give General Flynn a break. He didn't tell him to do that, but he thought he should consider it. Now, Comey wrote that memo. He leaked it to the New York Times. We asked for those records. Isn't it interesting? We haven't gotten that record. So you have Comey and his people reading stuff to the New York Times, this FBI director, this former FBI director, and we're asking for it lawfully, and we haven't gotten it. So the fact we've had to go to court today to sue to get the record is a scandal in and of itself. So again, we are doing the hard work necessary to get the records for you about this scandal. And I know the president's frustrated about this. You can see this in the tweets, and he's right to be frustrated. I don't understand why there aren't more people in this city. Well, I do understand, but it's disheartening that there aren't more people in this city who are defending not the president because of his, again, personally, but the presidency and this president in terms of the fact he's president and he deserves the protections of the rule of law as any other citizen would, against this kind of abuse of power by the FBI, the Justice Department, and officials in the intelligence community who are leaking and targeting him improperly. So we're on top of it all. This is our sixth lawsuit. 6 lawsuits we filed about Russia. So we want to get the documents. And they may or may not make President Trump look bad politically or not. I don't think there are any legal issues for him personally. But I guarantee you they're going to make the Obama administration look bad, because that's why the deep state doesn't want to give them to us, and that's why they're still fighting us in court, despite President Trump being president. And but there's more, because this isn't the only issue we're investigating. So we want accountability for what went on during the Obama administration. We sued the Justice Department just recently over the Obama shakedown that was going on through the Justice Department. And what was going on is the Justice Department would sue banks or corporations, and as part of the agreement for these corporations and these banks to get out from under the lawsuits, they would settle. They wouldn't admit wrongdoing, but when the feds come after you and you're a big corporation that essentially is a creature of the federal government, certainly the banking industry these days, thanks to Dodd-Frank as a public utility, they say, how big is the check you want us to write to get you off our backs? And one of the conditions that the shakedown artists at the Obama holder, now lynched Justice Department, one of their conditions, what they were doing is that they were requiring these companies to write checks to third-party left-wing interest groups. Think about that. So you're sued by the federal government, and in order to settle this lawsuit, the federal government requires you to fund the lunatic fringe of the American left, who had nothing to do with the lawsuit at all. Maybe they did. That's why we sued. So we sued for records about this issue, and we sued before. And this is how the slush fund worked. And this was the House Judiciary Committee. They found upwards of $1 billion were funneled through this shakedown operation, through the Obama Justice Department. So we, again, have asked for the records. We haven't gotten them. Our focus has been specifically with a settlement that led to donations to La Raza, the racist organization supposedly protecting Hispanic rights. La Raza is an inherently racist name, and it was founded based on racism. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. The Urban League, another left-wing group, and the National Community Reinvestment Coalition. Sounds like, I think its name tells you what its philosophical outlook is. All of which shouldn't be getting money as a result of this process. I want you to imagine this. Imagine if we sued the Trump administration sues, a corporation, and they say, okay, we're going to settle this lawsuit, Corporation X, but you got to give $10 million to Judicial Watch. And we had nothing to do with anything. Well, that's what was going on during the Obama administration. So that's what we're suing to get records about. And thankfully, President Trump, through his general sessions, shut down this process. He issued a memo last week, I believe, saying we're not doing it anymore. Justice Department isn't supposed to be doing this type of thing, and we ain't going to do it anymore. So that's good, but we still need to get accountability of what went on, because a lot of the officials that were behind this are still there at the Justice Department, and we want to know how this went and see if there was additional corruption that needs to be exposed there. One more issue. Again, this is, the Obama administration playing the race card. Now the Trump administration is having to deal with it. And so what happened is the Trump administration is one of its last, not one of its last acts, but last year, the Office of Management and Budget, has proposed to add a new, quote, Middle Eastern North American ethnic category to the 2020 U.S. Census. So you know the traditional categories: white, black, Hispanic, Indian, American Indian or Native American. I'm not quite sure what the correct phrase is these days. Pacific Islander. Well, the radical Islamists wanted a Middle Eastern category. And so this rule is pending. And what Judicial Watch did is, on behalf of its supporters, those of you out there who support us and other sensible Americans, filed comments to try to put the kibosh on this. And just think about this. Why does there need to be another divisive racial category put out by the federal government? I mean, so that should be offensive in and of itself. But let's start talking about science. You know, the left likes to talk about science. Let's start talking about science in terms of this racial discord that's being sown in part by these federal regulations that are being proposed. And we quote the American Anthropological Association. Genetic data shows that no matter how racial groups are defined, two people from the same racial group are about as different from each other as two people from any two different racial groups. Think about that. So you have maybe less in common, if you're black, with another black person as you might with a white person. And same goes for whites versus blacks or Hispanics, whatever racial category the government wants to put you in. Now, the MENA category, this Middle Eastern category, does not appear anywhere else in the world, not even in the region defined by it. And the region, by the way, combines 27 countries. 27 countries. So think about, why is it you think the radical Islamists want a new Middle Eastern category in the U.S. Census? It's because they want to be able to sue. They want to be able to sue for civil rights violations if they have this protected category, this protected class eventually. And it makes it harder to conduct anti-terrorism actions here in the United States, because if you target someone, if you target Islamists, they're from the Middle East, therefore it's ethnic targeting. So the Trump administration really needs to shut this down. And I encourage you to look at the letter, because it's an important issue. And it's one of these things that shows you why it is so important to be vigilant here in Washington, because there's all this damaging activity that's taking place. And I sometimes don't even wonder, I wonder if the Trump administration knows how damaging the activity is in terms of where exactly the full extent of it. So this, I hope, alerts the Trump administration to the damaging thing that may take place unless they put the kibosh on it. And certainly, I would encourage you, and I'm not sure if you can do this, but go to our website, look up the material, and you might be able to file, it may be past time. No, actually, it probably is past time, but you should complain to your members of Congress about this proposal from OMB. Get your members involved in this. So this is something worth pursuing. And one more issue to talk about. This is interesting. So the Obama administration and the American left hates the idea of these secret memos and such used to justify some national security moves, like the raid of bin Laden. So there were memoranda that were developed for the raid of bin Laden to justify the raid and other activities around the raid. And we asked for them because, hey, I thought the Obama administration was transparent. And long story short is we couldn't get them. And in telling the court why we couldn't get them, it was kind of implied that the memos were written before the decisions were made. Well, guess what? That wasn't the case. The memos were written after the fact. So it looks like, A, the court was misled. It was actually so bad that the Justice Department had to go back and on behalf of the Defense Department and the other agencies and tell the court, we want to be clear about the timing of these memos, although they weren't entirely clear in terms of giving the specifics about the timing. So this is really troubling. So yeah, that the court rule on incorrect information, and it looks to me like the agencies misled the court in order to protect these memos and frankly protect the fact they were written after the fact. So here we got the Obama gang lecturing us repeatedly about how you need to follow the rule of law and follow the rules, and the Bush administration were completely out of control when it came to prosecuting war on terror. Here, they did one of the most momentous raids in history, and they didn't do any legal analysis beforehand. Now, I don't necessarily believe they needed to do that, but they promised they would do that type of activity, and they promised that and opposed the lack of transparency by the prior administration on these types of memoranda. So we were fighting to get these records. They didn't want to give them to us, and then it turns out they were misleading the court about it. So I tell you, on issues big and small, the war against terror, the shakedowns, the Obama administration was really operated outside the rules, didn't want anyone to know about it, so you had the illegal secrecy. And I would encourage the Trump administration, this is part of cleaning house and draining the swamp. Stop fighting us on this, because you'll be outraged to learn there hasn't been any change in the way the government approaches these FOIA cases. They're still stalling us on Clinton emails, you name it. We have to fight for everything. And this isn't what I believe President Trump wants, but President Trump isn't running the show. The agencies don't want to listen to him, and the Justice Department, as you see with the criminal investigation, has a mind of its own. And this is a real threat to our Republican form of government when the leaders we put in place to run the government isn't allowed to do it or aren't allowed to do it. But you can trust Judicial Watch to uphold the rule of law as best we can and support the rule of law. We do it through this FOIA litigation and by educating you, the American people, about what we find, by getting the documents out there, and by showing some leadership on these cutting-edge issues, such as the illicit prosecution and investigation through the Special Counsel Office, and prior to that through the deep state of Trump and his team. So we're on watch on all of it. We've got lawsuits, and again, if there are topics of interest to you that you're reading about, and you're wondering if Judicial Watch should or is investigating it, drop us a line, because we rely on people highlighting these issues too sometimes to help us figure out what to investigate and find leads. So I encourage you to participate in that way, and of course I encourage you to support our good work as well with your voluntary support. We don't shake you down, we just ask you for money, and hopefully you voluntarily give it to us. We don't play the Obama way. So thanks again for your support, and those of you out there who are fathers, I wish you all a happy Father's Day this weekend. I'll see you next week.